but I want to go through this in kind of in one go, and then we'll open the floor to questions at the end. So first of all, welcome aboard to this free webinar. I want to go through the exact process that I use myself and that I use with my clients and have used with my clients over the last several years of coaching to give you guys the absolute essentials behind my process of getting into phenomenal shape. Now, what does that mean? It means being strong, lean, muscular, and healthy. And the central focus of this webinar is really about the process of dropping body fat whilst we retain as much muscle mass, whilst we retain as much strength, and whilst we keep health markers exactly where we want them to be. So a real quick introduction. My name is Julian Fernandez, Julian Titanium, as it goes on Instagram. So my background real quickly, I did my undergraduate degree in sports psychology and coaching. I did my first class research for my undergrad in physiology, exercise physiology. And then with that, it got recommended for the Journal of Strength Conditioning. I then went to do my postgraduate studies at the University of St Mary's, Twickenham in London in strength conditioning science. So that's a little bit about my formal background. Principally, my ethos towards coaching is very much from an experience combined with an evidence-based practice. So I'm kind of like the formally educated meathead. I like to mix the two, and that tends to work pretty well for most of my guys. In that time, since I first started training, I started training at 15 years old, more than half a lifetime ago, way more. I since then got into powerlifting. I became an internationally achieved powerlifter. I broke some records in the junior category as a drug-free tested athlete throughout my university years. I got injured badly, and basically that's what got me into bodybuilding. I decided I wanted to continue lifting. The surgeon said I would never lift again. I wanted to prove them wrong, and I got into bodybuilding as a result of that. Basically, I had some congenital spinal issues, which led to severe disc degeneration and some vertebral fractures. So bodybuilding was a plan, really actually a plan C. I was a football player initially, then got into powerlifting after a knee surgery, then got into bodybuilding after back issues. So here we are today. Anyway, subsequently, after my degrees, I got into coaching, and I've been doing that now since I graduated from my postgrad studies in 2013. So a long time now. So why you guys are here, right? It's pretty simple. I want to cut through all the misinformation, and I really want to give you guys the tools to finally understand this process of dropping body fat. Okay, and to do it in the most effective manner, the most efficient manner, that is the mission here, because so many people get on this journey and unfortunately they run into dead ends simply because their efforts are sufficient, but unfortunately the effort is misplaced. Okay. I just wanted to quickly check to see if people were coming in without needing to be admitted. So that all looks pretty good. That's fine. Cool. Okay, cool. So guys, let's get into this. All right. So the truth about fat loss. Now, the fundamentals of this process revolve around ideal nutrition, an ideal training approach, ideal lifestyle management, and of course, supplementation. And I wouldn't necessarily say in that order. I'm going to go through what I believe the hierarchy is throughout this presentation. So most people fail in this process because of these three reasons. All right. They want to do too much too quickly. They set unrealistic expectations. And although they put in a lot of effort, perhaps this describes some of you guys watching, they put in so much effort, but that effort is misdirected. So let's start with the first one, too much too soon. This means being too aggressive in the approach with their training, i.e. doing too much in the gym, too often in the gym for too long. It means expecting to be able to do stupendous amounts of cardio. And from a nutritional perspective, it means doing too much of a deficit, cutting out too many calories too quickly, being too extreme with food restrictions. Basically, it's all these actions geared towards trying to achieve too much too quickly. And what that leads to is some immediately gratifying results, but a very quick pitfall, a very quick drop-off in progression once they hit a brick wall, brought about by extreme levels of fatigue and disinterest in the process, because it just becomes so impossible to sustain. Now, in terms of expectations, again, I think happiness, all right, is expectations minus reality. So I've had it before where clients have come in and where I have not. This is when I first got into coaching. I wasn't too clear. I wasn't 100% clear on what the expectations should be. And the client would come in with expectations of, let's say, I don't know, 4 or 5 pounds fat loss per week. Okay. Now, The client turned out to be dropping about 1% of body fat, which is about, in this case, for this person I'm thinking of, it was about 2 pounds they were dropping per week, which now I would state as being a phenomenal rate of progress. That is the target rate of progress, about 1% of body fat loss per week. And that's exceptional. And yet this client was disappointed. Their happiness was not where it should be because their expectation was unrealistic. So setting expectations appropriately is absolutely key. And it's one of the big reasons why people fail, because they feel their efforts aren't being rewarded, whereas in reality, it's just not the case. And then the final element here is effort, okay? Like I said before, with expecting too much too soon and putting in too much effort, a lot of the time, the people that struggle with building a physique that is lean and muscular is not derived from the lack of effort. I speak to guys all the time. They come to me on consultation calls and they're training 5 times a week. They're doing their meal prep. They're doing lots of cardio. They're doing crazy amounts of steps. But there are elements within their process which are misdirected. And those misdirected efforts have a habit of undoing the productive efforts. And so a great fat loss strategy is about creating a high level of synergy. It's about bringing the necessary components together so we actually see your results. And when you achieve that, like honestly, it's mind-boggling when you get that formula and you see how much progress you truly can make. And that's one of my favorite parts of coaching is when a client finally sees what can happen when their efforts are well aligned. Okay, guys, so when I coach people, the titanium fat loss method, it's a results-driven, science-backed approach, which is all about strategy. Okay, it's about strategy and then bringing about a higher level of standard through keeping my clients accountable. Now, throughout this presentation, guys, I will keep referencing, all right? If you do want to work personally with me, there's my WhatsApp number there. Okay, it's +44 7360 227 638. And for those of you watching here on Zoom, I've also put that in the chat. So you can WhatsApp me if you want to get in touch, talk more about your goals. I've also put the call booking link in that chat as well, in case you wanted to book a call. All right, so let's get into the good stuff. So in my opinion, the most important facet of a fat loss process, and I don't want to put a percentage on it. I hear a lot of arbitrary percentages like, nutrition is 90% of the process. I want to be honest here and say it is the most important facet, but I couldn't put a percentage figure on it. Just know that it is the biggest turner of this wheel towards fat loss. So a great nutrition structure, and this is crucial, guys, a great nutrition structure supports a lifestyle and training structure geared towards fat loss and muscle retention. Okay. And this relates back to that whole idea of synergy that I was talking about just a moment ago. It's supposed to support the correct nutritional training approach. And what I want you to kind of gather from this salient point here is that it's not that you train for fat loss. It's not that you eat for fat loss. It's that you live a lifestyle geared towards fat loss because all things have to be aligned. Okay. So here's the hierarchy when it comes to nutrition. And I want you to all be really clear on what's actually important and what the myths are that are perhaps holding you back. So the number one priority when it comes to dropping body fat is your caloric intake. Categorically, you're not going to drop fat if you are not in a caloric deficit. And what this simply means is that you consume less calories than your body needs to use over the course of a day or several days over a continuum of time. Okay. So let's say your maintenance calories are 3,000. What that means is your body needs 3,000 calories to exist exactly as it is right here as you sit today. And by eating less than that 3,000 calories, you create a gap, you create a deficit. And that deficit is catered for by the consumption of tissue. In an ideal case, under the ideal conditions, body fats. The body will metabolize its own body fat to actually create a source of energy. Okay, so that's the most important thing, is that you must be in a caloric deficit. How do you calculate that? Well, you can use online calculators, or a coach will give you a calculation combined with their experience, what they've seen before, and other metrics to get a really good estimation. Okay, the next most important thing when it comes to your nutrition is your macros. Now, a lot of you watching this will know what that means, some may not. So I'm going to go through what that means. It simply refers to 4 different nutrient types: your protein, your carbs, your fats, and your fiber. And all of these elements contribute a caloric value to your daily intake. And just a real quick run through, it's around 4 calories for a gram of carbs. It's around 4 calories for a gram of protein. It's around 9 calories for a gram of fat. It's 0 essentially for fiber. It can't be digested. And then it's about 7 calories if we factor alcohol consumption, a gram of alcohol as well. Okay. So principally, we want to build out our calories using a split of macronutrients that is ideal for the sustenance, the maintenance of muscle tissue, and the loss of body fat. Okay. Now we're talking specifically about dropping body fat, and that's why I want to be really clear on the value of macros. You need to build a nutrition profile which has sufficient calories, okay, or rather insufficient calories, but still caters to the right amount of carbohydrates to fuel great training and recovery, the right amount of protein to fuel tremendous recovery and growth, the right amount of fats to support a host of metabolic processes, not least things like hormone synthesis, which are going to be crucial to maintain during a cutting phase. And then fiber, if you're not digesting your food, you're not, the whole process is worthless. It's about what you can digest. And the right amount of fiber, roughly 30 grams ish, is ideal on a daily basis for you to aid digestion. Okay. So we've got calories at the top, sufficiently insufficient. Okay. Macros is the next thing. We need the right amount of protein, carbs, and fats to fuel muscle retention and aid fat loss. And then micros and phytonutrients. These are the next echelon. All right. This is the quality of your food and how much it contains in terms of vitamins and minerals. So, yeah, you could hit perfect calories and macros, but there could be a deficiency in micros and phytonutrients. And think of these things here, micros and phytonutrients. Think of these as the catalyst that actually enables you to utilize the calories and the macros. These are the little helpers in the process that enable your body to actually function correctly in order to metabolize that energy and those nutrients that you're getting from your food. They're also just crucial for day-to-day general health. Okay, if you have a nutrient deficiency, you're going to suffer some ill effects from that, and they can vary enormously. I won't go into detail of all of them, but principally what this means, guys, is you need a colorful diet. Chicken and rice and some broccoli 4 or 5 times a day for 3 months will leave you with some pretty significant deficiencies. Okay, so those are the most important things, and really take stock of this. Okay, these are the crucial components that you need to be most concerned with. The secondary components, incidentally, for a lot of people, receive the most attention. And this is where people are misdirecting their effort, as I referred to right at the start. So, meal timing. So many people get so obsessed with the timing of their foods. How quick do they eat after a workout? Whether they should or should not be consuming food after a certain hour in the day. After, I don't know, 9 p.m. before bed. Let me be very straight with you, okay? And not to oversimplify, but it's worth being clear on this. Meal timing is significantly less important than you think. Because we're obsessed with this whole construct of a 24-hour day. Okay, it's not really a construct. Of course, 24 hours is the time of a rotation of the Earth, but our day starts and our day finishes. But actually, for our body and our composition, the more important thing to think about is the continuum of energy consumption and expenditure. Your body doesn't really know from a metabolism perspective when one day passes into the next. And so meal timing within a 24-hour window is less important than you getting in sufficient calories and nutrients over the course of, shall we say, a week. And we're going to talk more about this as a top tip for you guys looking to drop body fat, is it makes more sense to think about weekly totals than to be concerned about the exact hour-by-hour timing of your food during the course of a day. I could labor this point a lot more, but hopefully that drives it home. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is food quality. Now, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to just stand here and say food quality is not important, but obsessing over acquiring your protein from the finest cut of sirloin steak, I'm looking at you, Paul Rosenberg, is less important than getting insufficient protein in general from other sources. Okay. Another example, getting in your micronutrients from the finest markets providing fruit and vegetables is not necessarily the most important thing to focus on as compared to perhaps supplementing your intake with some frozen fruit and veg at times. Okay. Food quality is important to an extent, but it's not worth obsessing over the above aforementioned priority factors, your calories, your macros, and getting insufficient micros and phytonutrients. Okay, so progress in fat loss is not predicated on you consuming 5-star Michelin star, uh, you know, qualities of food. In terms of whole foods versus processed foods, yes, that is important. And I would not recommend getting in excessive amounts of processed foods. It's pretty obvious, guys. I shouldn't really have to say this, but you need to be consuming foods that are obviously healthy in the majority. This means, don't consume 80% of your foods from packaged, highly processed sources. Aim to get the majority of your food from whole food sources. Okay, so how do we set up a diet for long-term sustainability and how do we adapt that plan over time? And this is now really where we get into the nitty-gritty of the process behind food. We understand the basics of what's important and what isn't. We also need to think about the fact that over a period of time, your requirements will differ. So in order to set up an appropriate nutrition plan, we need to factor what the client needs, what the individual needs here and now. And so if you're watching this, you might need 3,000 calories today and 200 grams of protein today. But that's not necessarily going to be the case in 6 weeks from now, because over time, your needs, your body's needs, your expenditure needs will vary. And so what we want to do, understanding that we need to stay in a deficit, understanding that as we get lighter and leaner, our energy requirements will drop. We need to be adaptive in adjusting our calorie intake over time. So here's what I recommend. Always start your dieting process to drop body fat at a caloric intake that is a little bit higher than you expect. If you use a calorie calculator, start at maintenance plus 5 to 10%. Start there, okay? Because if you are training appropriately, if you are managing your lifestyle appropriately, if you are taking a step up in your own standards, you're probably going to find that your expenditure is going to be greater. And what we want to become is a high fuel consumption machine. We want to build a body that requires a lot of energy so that actually we never need to get too low in the caloric intake and be, running on fumes too quickly in the process. So as I said at the start, guys, a lot of people will cut their calories massively. They might need 3,000 and in week one, they're down to 1,500. What I'm telling you is you're better off starting at 3,000, if not 3,150 to 3,300, establishing a baseline, monitoring your progress, and then only making a reduction in calories as and when you don't see a reduction in total body fat or scale weight. Okay, we'll talk more about that. So what you need to factor, guys, is starting at a high caloric intake, as high as you can, as high as is reasonable. And then we need to be willing to change it over time as and when we see at the relevant data points that we are not making progress. And what that usually means is dropping calories by 1 or 200 on a weekly basis as and when we see progression stall. That's the process that I use. It's a simplified version of it, but that's the process that I use with my clients, okay, on a weekly basis. If we do not see the parameters, if we do not see the weight drop happening and they are adhering to the parameters that I've set them, that's when we're going to drop the calories by a maximum of 1 to 200 calories each time. Okay. So just to recap there, the most important things are your calorie intake. Macros are super important too. You need to get in a good, rounded, diverse range, a colorful diet. Your meal timing isn't that important. Food quality is important from the perspective of getting in predominantly whole foods and not an excessive amount of processed foods. You need to set up your diet from a point of a decent caloric intake and be willing to drop it as and when is appropriate to, as signified by stalling of fat loss progression. Now, again, guys, my coaching process involves training, it involves nutrition and all of the facets. If you do want to work with me, you want to inquire what that looks like, just use that number over there, +44 7360 227 638. It's in the chat, okay? The link's there. You can also book a call with me using that link. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, guys, is training for fat loss. Let me just have a quick sip of coffee. I talk quite a lot between calls and check-ins and presentations. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, right. So training. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Now, if you want to be lean and muscular, that is a very different goal to just dropping weight. I'm sure we can all agree on that. Losing weight is relatively easy. Emphasis on relatively. It's not easy, but it is relatively easy compared to dropping fat and exclusively fat. Many of you watching this want to end up lean and muscular. You don't just want to end up thin. Okay. Thin is one of those words that gets me. I got shredded once for a competition, guys, right? And I'm getting out of the car, right? And as I'm about to get out of the car, someone parks next to me, right? And they're left like this much space. And they get out the car on their side and they see that I'm kind of, it's going to be a struggle for me. And at this point, I'm like super dieted. I'm like a week out. All right. I'm about, I don't know, 90 kilos, like, what is that, 200 pounds, muscular, in great shape, if I say so myself. And this person gets out and they look at me and they go, "Oh, good thing you're thin." And I was like, fuck, like kidney blow right there. Good thing you're thin. Are you kidding me? I wanted to just pull out a front biceps, but no, I didn't. I'm not that much of a douchebag. Not quite. In any case, let's get into this. So the training that you need to deploy to get lean and muscular is very different to dropping purely just weight. And this is where so many people go wrong. People begin a fat loss protocol, and in doing so, they adapt their training. They do these things, all right? They do these silly things. They increase their rep ranges. So they go from like hitting 8 to 12 repetitions to 20 to 30. They increase their sets to total number of sets throughout the session. They increase their cardio output. And right off the bat, they're like, I'm going to do 15,000 steps every day. Now, I'm going to get straight to the salient point. You need to train to build muscle, even when you are dropping fat. The function of training during a get shredded process is to still build muscle. Fat loss specifically comes from lifestyle management and your nutrition. Okay. Cardio is another tool. We're going to talk about that in a second. But your weight training, your gym-based resistance training has to be geared towards building muscle. And so it is your absolute priority to focus on still achieving progressive overload to maintain muscle mass. Now, obviously, when you're in a caloric deficit, this becomes more challenging. So we're going to talk now about how we maintain strength, factoring these training variables in order to sustain muscle. Okay, now, a slight simplification, but technically speaking, you will have the best odds of maintaining muscle mass if you can maintain strength. Your strength and the size that you have as you start your fat loss process are strongly correlated. Okay, strength and size are strongly correlated. If you begin training with higher repetitions and using lower percentages of your relative max effort, okay, you will get weaker. And in getting weaker, you will also get smaller. So here's what you need to do. You need to accept that although your energy is less, you can still train with intensity. And intensity on a fat loss protocol is the number one training variable by which you need to place top priority. Okay. So you're not going to be training more, okay, frequency, and you're not going to be training with more volume. You're going to be focusing on doing what's necessary to increase intensity. And here's what I would recommend. I would recommend looking at your current training plan that built you the muscle, and I would recommend trimming the fat. Okay, not a completely inappropriate turn of phrase in the context of this fat loss webinar, but I'm talking here about trimming the fat metaphorically in your program, removing the ancillary shit that isn't really turning the wheel. What that means is if you've got 2 incline-based horizontal presses on your chest day, do you really need 2 or do you just need 1? Okay, because I'm telling you, the more you do, the less ability you have to train with intensity. It's a trade-off. Do you really need to be hitting cable lateral raises and dumbbell lateral raises? No, okay. You need to now focus on quality and intensity, and I'll take that a step further. I want you to focus on progressive overload exclusively on the very first working set of the key exercises in a given training session. So if it's a chest and arms day, you're going to progressively overload that flat bench press on the first set. The subsequent 2 and second and third set, not as important, but provided you are at least maintaining the repetitions and the load of the previous week with the goal to actually progress it, you're giving yourself the best odds of maintaining, if not building, some muscle mass. So that's crucial, guys. Accept the fact that you're going to reduce your total volume, reduce the number of exercises if need be, reduce the number of sets to failure, and just focus on progressing that first set only on the important ones. I'm not even fussed about, progressing. I don't give a damn about progressing my cable fly first set if I've just progressed my flat press and my incline press on the chest day. That's good enough for me. I've ticked that box. I've given my muscle a reason to exist. And this brings me on to that next subject here, which is managing fatigue. All right. This is one of the biggest reasons people fall off. Yeah. You train too much with too much intensity, too many sets to fatigue, to failure, you will accumulate fatigue. And fatigue is something that we feel directly after a training session. But I'm sure you guys have all committed to a training program. And, week one, you feel great. Week two, you're like, oh, okay, this is getting tough. Week three, you're kind of disinterested in getting into the gym. That's a key sign that the fatigue is accumulating. And so we want to manage fatigue accordingly, especially given that we're not getting in the same amount of calories we once were. So my recommendation here is take a maximum of 1 set to failure on every exercise, a maximum of 1 set to failure. And I promise you, you can still achieve a growth stimulus by going to a point of 1 rep in reserve or 2 reps in reserve. And that just means if you could hit 12, if you stop at 10, you're not going to lose muscle. In fact, it's a very smart strategic move. Now, the whole subject of programming, I've gone through the major elements there, guys. But again, this is my specialization. And, for those of you who really want a more results guaranteed approach, if you want me to take care of your programming, again, get in touch. This is what I do. I bring all components together to marry your training, your nutrition, your lifestyle management. I've got a few clients here on the call who are watching in. They can attest to this. I'll bring everything together such that you can achieve the most results with the least amount of thinking. You can just simply follow the orders, knowing that the best process has been given to you with the data at hand. Okay. So again, there's that number there. It's in the chat. For those watching elsewhere, the number to contact me on WhatsApp is +44 7360 227 638. All right. Check it out. Send me a message. All right. The next heading, guys, is lifestyle management. And this is where things get quite interesting, because let's assume you're training perfectly. Let's assume you are eating perfectly. There's still a lot of scope here to mess things up, right? We talked at the start about how, the most progress comes when there is synergy between all components, and how actually there are lots of people out there who are putting in loads of effort in the training and the nutrition. But if there's a missing piece, it can undo a lot of that effort. And lifestyle management is usually where things can go awry. So steps, you want to standardize the number of steps you get in on a daily basis. Again, think of it more like a weekly total. I typically ask clients to start at around 8,000, and that gives us some scope to titrate upwards and eventually get up to about 10,000. Sometimes, in some cases, depending on how much cardio people are doing, anything up to 12,000 steps. On the subject of cardio, I do believe cardio has its place. I'm just going to come back to the previous section on training. A maximum of around 4 to 5, 20 minutes of moderate intensity, steady state cardio after your weight training is a really good start point. Again, at the appropriate times, titrating upwards in order to increase calorie expenditure. And the same applies for the steps. 8,000 is good. If you don't have one, get a pedometer to track it. The next thing I want to talk about is sleep. A few of my guys, I can see a few names here of some of my clients watching this. Paul, you're right in the middle of my screen. Paul's someone who has terrible, terrible sleep. We're trying to get to the bottom of, getting that resolved. But it is really important, guys. I mean, he's got a phenomenal physique in spite of that. But I just often wonder what we could achieve if, we get that sleep back up to where it should be. 7 to 8 hours is ideal. And it's, excuse the pun, it's a dream to get that. 7 to 8 hours leaves you feeling fresh. It aids your recovery. It aids your focus. It facilitates, focus. I mean, for me, if I get a bad night's sleep, I'm more susceptible to cravings. It's harder for me to lock into my training session. My strength output is diminished, We know there's a huge correlation between strength output over prolonged periods of time and muscle mass that we retain. I can wake up in the morning after a poor night's sleep and I can literally feel it right off the bat in my grip strength. If I were to measure that grip strength, I think that would be a really key indicator of how well rested I am. In fact, there are studies that demonstrate this. Grip strength is a great indicator of recovery. Try it. Next time you have a really, really bad night's sleep, just squeeze your hand and just see how it feels. I guarantee you will feel the diminished strength after a poor night's sleep. So we're looking at 7 or 8 hours and ideally good quality sleep. All right. A few things you can do to improve your sleep quality. Deep breathing exercises before going to bed, making sure you are in a truly dark room, temperature regulation. I set the AC over here. It's really hot here at the moment. I set the AC here to around about 18 degrees. I like a cool room. Ideally, it's even cooler than that. No screen time. So I know it's hard, guys, but no screen time, an hour to 2 hours before bedtime is going to help as well. Hydration, taper that off as you get to the point of going to bed. The last thing you want is to be in deep sleep and to be woken up by your body needing to get up and go for a piss. So there's a few things there to factor with sleep. Hydration wise, I recommend getting in about 3 to 4 liters as a minimum, around about a gallon in US money. Now, that is obviously determined by your output, the climate that you live in, and so on and so forth. That is an absolute minimum. I'm shocked when I get clients sometimes report that they're getting in 1 to 2 liters. Like this container here, this is, what is this? It's 700 mils. Okay, so just under a liter. I shit you not. I legitimately will get through 4 or 5 of these just in my training session. And I'm not really a sweater. I'm really not. Like, I've known sweaters. I'm not a sweater, and I need to be drinking that much just to get my training session done. So if I'm consuming, what is that, like 2.8 liters in a session, if you're not getting in 2.8 liters throughout the entire day, you're leaving progression on the table. And because hydration is an absolutely fundamental part of pretty much, in fact, I'll say every metabolic process, especially those surrounding recovery and strength training. Okay. If you're dehydrated, you are not going to be performing optimally. So, go home point, 3 to 4 liters, absolute minimum. Use a electrolyte mix as well. What you don't want to do is overhydrate and just wash out your electrolyte balance. Use an electrolyte supplement if need be, or I add rock salt and sea salt to all of my meals to restore my electrolytes and my minerals in my body. So although I drink a lot, I also salt my food. Not table salt, guys, mineral salt and rock salt. Sorry, rock salt and sea salt. The next facet here of lifestyle management is stress management. Now, what does this mean? It means elevated cortisol does not aid fat loss. I had a really detailed discussion with a client of mine. He's been a client and became a very good friend of mine, one of my closest friends in England. He recently he's been really putting time into understanding his cortisol levels. They've been elevated for years, and they have made the process of dropping fat difficult. I said at the start, caloric intake is important, but it is impacted by other things. One thing is your stress levels. And so fat loss as a process will be hindered if stress is elevated over a period of time, for prolonged periods of time. So how do you know if you've got high cortisol? You can get it tested, but generally it doesn't take a genius to know that you're suffering from huge amounts of stress, whether that's relationship stress, business, work, career, personal shit, lack of sleep, physical stress from excessive training. You need to do what you can to minimize your stress. And so, not to get too life coachy like, but principally, you need to run an audit on your life and identify your key stresses. And you need to decide if you can do something about it, just fucking do it. Like a lot of the stresses that we have, they've been lingering for a long period of time. We know they exist. We don't do anything about it. I'm guilty of it too, right? I need to do this myself at the moment. There's lots of things that are stressing me out. I need to just run an audit and figure out what can be dealt with, deal with it. And if it can't be dealt with, the quickest way to solve a problem is to decide it's not a problem. As obvious as that is, the quickest way to resolve a problem is to decide it's not a problem. I think Alex Hormozy said that. Okay, someone far smarter than I am to take it from him. So stress management, guys, it's important. Salient point. Okay, now we're getting into the probably the least important part, but you won't believe how many people open a conversation with me about supplements. Like this is where the industry is a little bit messed up. The marketing surrounding supplements is so magnetic, compelling that people really put way too much weight on the impact of supplements. So I'm going to run through what I use and what I recommend for my clients. Okay. The essentials of over-the-counter supplements that I take. I use a company called Prozis. They sponsor me. All right. I'm completely above board about this. They've sponsored me for 2 years. They are a phenomenal supplement brand. Huge range. Check it out. Okay. Just search Prozis on Google. You can use my code titanium to get an extra 10% off, but check it out. All right. They outstanding. I use whey protein. I use omega 369. I use multivitamin, D3, pre-workout when it calls upon it, intra-workout always, and that includes maltodextrin. Okay, so when I'm traveling at the moment, okay, so what I do is I just chuck all of my supplements in one container, and these are those essentials that I just mentioned. In here, I've got my multivitamin, I've got D3, I've got fish oil. What else have I got in here? Multi, fish oil, D3. That's what I got in this one. And then I got tubs of whey over there, pre-workout, intra, and maltodextrin. Okay, I'll take that with me. These are your essential supplements for general health, but also performance. These are things that if you're deficient in will impact your recovery and they will impact your training output. So it's not a huge investment, guys, to get these basics in. And what they'll do is they will just fill the gaps in your nutrition. Aim to get all of these things that I mentioned from your nutrition and sunlight, something that we're deficient in the UK. Over here in Dubai, it's aplenty. But get those basics in. Now, in terms of pre-workouts, intra and maltodextrin, if you're looking to optimize your training output, especially when you're in a caloric deficit, it is wise. It is 100% wise to be getting in a little bit of a boost before you train because your energy is going to peak and trough throughout the day. You want it to peak in your training sessions. So I use a pre-workout called Big Shot, again from Prozis. It's predominantly caffeine based, okay, with citrulline, L-arginine, beta-alanine as well, among some other different compounds. That gives me a bit of a rise. I train hard. Intra-workout, I consume BCAAs or EAAs, and then I add a scoop of maltodextrin as well, about 40 grams of maltodextrin, just to elevate and keep my blood sugar elevated throughout the training session. All right, now, big question a lot of you guys will ask is supplemental protein versus real food. Honestly, I rely pretty damn heavily on supplemental protein. This may shock some people, but I will have 3 shakes per day. Happily, because the bioavailability of whey protein, a high quality whey protein, I use 100% whey by Prozis, is phenomenal. Arguably better than, and this sounds crazy, but better than whole food, like chicken. Okay. Obviously, chicken isn't that micronutrient dense at all. Beef is. Obviously, the whey protein won't have as diverse a range of nutrients outside of macros. But I'm telling you guys, do not be afraid to utilize whey protein in order to get your daily intake of protein. And on that subject, the literature is all over the place on this. In fact, I was this over the course of the last few days, been watching various different YouTube videos by Dr. Mike and his compadres discussing the variance in what's been recommended in literature about grams of protein per pound of body weight. The happy medium is aimed for about 1 gram of protein per pound of lean tissue, between 1 and 2. It's a broad spectrum. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, guys, is fat loss supplements specifically. You've probably seen all kinds of what we call thermogenic supplements. These are supposedly supplements that increase your metabolic rate in order to burn more fat. Are they effective? Measurably, no. They tend to be caffeine based. The idea is they kind of elevate your heart rate somewhat, such that at rest you burn a little bit more energy. It just is going to help push you into a little bit more of a deficit. Something that you could do simply by reducing your calorie intake, something that you simply could do by increasing your step count or your cardio output. Are they worth spending money on? Honestly, I would say no. I don't think you need to be looking towards thermogenic fat loss supplements in order to aid your fat loss journey. Okay, testosterone, all right, in the context of those using it on anabolic steroid cycles or those who are using it as a TRT option, okay? I'm totally honest. I use testosterone, okay? I've used testosterone for the last, like, what now, 7 years, okay? I was a drug-free athlete for a very long period of time. Like I said earlier in the call, broke records in drug-tested federations. That was my thing. When I pursued bodybuilding, I wanted to take things up a level. So I supplement with testosterone and derivatives thereof. Now, a lot of guys come to me in their 40s and 50s, and these are guys who might need some supplemental testosterone in their regime because they are suffering from age causing a reduction in testosterone. And this is where I recommend they go to their doctors. And I'd recommend the same to you. If you are noticing signs of low testosterone, it is absolutely worth seeing your doctor, having a blood test, seeing where your levels are, assessing your lifestyle, what your stress is like, what your sleep is like, what your nutrition is like. And if all those things are perfect and you need to bring your testosterone back into range, then your doctor might recommend testosterone replacement therapy. Now, in terms of the role of testosterone and fat loss, yes, an elevated level of testosterone will improve your ability to train and recover effectively, which could lead to a more effective process of sustaining muscle and dropping more fat over a equivalent period of time. The reason I'm bringing this up is a lot of people will ask about, are steroids going to be necessary on a fat loss journey? And the answer is categorically no. The main benefit of a steroid cycle is in the ceiling point of muscle mass that you hold. Okay. I get people online all the time going, you're only that ripped because you're on testosterone. Yeah. No, I've been absolutely shredded as a natty. The difference is I hold more muscle now. I hold more muscle. It has nothing to do with my composition in terms of body fat percentage. And so if you're looking to be muscular, lean, athletically built, you do not need to use testosterone to do that. Testosterone is a tool. If it's currently not where it should be, you can bring it back up to where it should be. That's going to benefit your health as well as your composition. Or if you are a competitor or someone who wants to elevate their physique to a new level, an enhanced ceiling point, and that's completely your prerogative. I'm not going to tell you that you have to be a competitor if you want to go down that road. I don't give a damn. All I care about is that you do it safely, diligently, that you do your due diligence, you speak to your doctors, you get your blood tests done, you get your blood work done periodically. That's fine, okay? But listen, guys, you don't need testosterone to get lean and athletically built, okay? So there's that. Again, with supplementation, I am here on hand for my clients. I help them with that component too. So if you do want to work with me and you want the complete program, the training, nutrition, etc., so on and so forth, including supplementation, you can always get in touch. All right. There's the WhatsApp number. Again, it's in the chat feature. Okay. So the final component we're going to talk about, guys, is mindset. Okay. And arguably, this is the most important facet of all. Your mindset going into this process is pivotal. And you need to develop the mindset of someone who is going to unequivocally win in this process of fat loss. And there's a few key things I've written down here. You need to deploy this mindset of standards over feelings. I talk about this a lot on my social media. Standards over feelings. Now, what this means is the way you feel about getting X done does not dictate whether you do it. If you understand that that is a primary action which leads towards the outcome that you know you want, in this case, fat loss, it's the standard of execution which gets it done over and above how you feel about getting it done. And that sounds super robotic because it is. Because sometimes feelings work for you. I'm not saying feelings are useless. No, they're a key component towards our survival mechanism. But sometimes they don't serve us. And you just got to draw a line and be like, no, I'm going to be a machine on this. Like, this is something that's important to me. How I'm feeling right now is it's a distraction. It prevents me from moving forward on what I want. So you need to operate from this position of, my standard is that if I promise myself I'm going to get it done, I'm going to get it done. And it's that simple. And that will offend some people. They'll ask me to be more compassionate. No, no, no. I'm never going to tell you what to do, right? It's what you want to do. But I'm telling you that feelings could stand in the way of that thing that you want to get done. The next thing is delayed gratification. It ties in closely to that first point. Understand that there's a trade-off. Sometimes it means not doing what you want to do now in order to have what you really want down the line. So that might mean, your mates might call you up and be like, hey, do you want to go down the pub, sink a few beers this evening? Oh, I'd love to, but what I really want is to have the confidence to take off my shirt and feel great about it on my summer holiday that's coming up in 4 weeks' time. Okay, delay that gratification. The next one is leaning into discomfort. All right. If it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. And I'm not saying this whole process of dropping fat needs to be arduous. What I'm saying is it's not going to be easy. If you're expecting it to be easy, if you're expecting to never act outside of visceral motivation, then you're in for a shock. There are going to be times where you're hungry. There are going to be times where you're a bit tired. You need to lean into that, understand that that is the barrier that's preventing you from getting to where you want to be. And if you can pass through that barrier of discomfort, way better things lie beyond that. The big one here is about the cost of discipline versus the cost of inaction. And often, my job is never to persuade someone to take action. But when people are on the fence about, oh, can I do this? Should I do this? Think of it this way, all right? The cost of discipline is doing that thing you don't want to do always, right? The cost of inaction is waking up each morning feeling like shit, thinking that you should have done something about it. It's knowing that time is ticking and you're not moving forwards. It's feeling stuck. It's lacking confidence. It's feeling unhealthy, and so on and so forth. And so, guys, which cost is more costly to you? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. And how would you really feel if you were stuck in the same position? Because you will be, unless you change something, you will be in the same position in 3 months from now, in 6 months from now, in 5 years from now. Unless you make a change, nothing's going to change. Okay, 2 more points on this, guys. You need to create a support network. You need to be around people that actually support your goal, because it may go against your immediate network and their habits. So you need to network with people that have similar goals, or maybe they don't have similar goals, but they want to support you. They're people that back you. Friends and family aren't always the ones that are going to back you. This is the really shocking thing. Okay. This comes as a surprise to a lot of people, but in so many cases, the people closest to you may not fully understand what your goals are about and why they're important to you. And if you know that to be the case, just be cautious about, what you communicate, because their energy is infectious. You need to be mindful of communicating and talking and protecting your energy is what I'm trying to get at here. Like, protect your goal, communicate to those that get it, want to support you, feed off of that, but just be aware of those people that perhaps are not going to be supportive. I'm not saying throw them out of your life. I'm not that callous. I'm just saying maybe they don't need to know everything. Okay. This is where a coach comes into play. All right. And again, a coach is there to support you. They understand your goal. They understand what's involved. They understand the sacrifices that you're making, and they want to see you achieve. So that's what I do for my guys. The final thing that I want to talk about with mindset is how powerful data tracking is for accountability. You need to have that list of tick box items: your food, your training, your cardio, your steps, your water, your sleep, all these different things on a daily basis. You need to be able to, at the end of the day, tick each one off. And then on a weekly basis, you need to look at the week and be like, okay, have I moved forwards? Have I stayed still? Or have I gone backwards? And you need to track that data. Track things like those aforementioned data points. Track things like your mood. Track the things like your strength. Track the things like how you felt throughout the week. All of these things are reference points that you can improve upon each week. And you need to hold yourself to that check-in process, either with yourself or with a coach. And being accountable, like, what we don't measure, we can't manage. You have to measure these things so that you can manage them. And by manage them, I mean progress them and ensure that you're always moving directionally in the appropriate manner. So the final thing I'll say here is, to break through these plateaus, you cannot rely on being motivated all the time. You have to understand that motivation is going to come up, it's going to come down. When you hit a plateau, it usually suggests something needs to change. And it doesn't always mean increasing output. It doesn't always mean increasing your training output or your cardio or your steps or reducing your food. Sometimes it means taking a break. And it's about knowing at those points, when is appropriate to actually take a break. So again, guys, this is, one of the last times I'm going to bring this up. If you do want the absolute ideal process towards transformation and dropping body fat, this is where coaching makes a difference because it brings about a high level of accountability. It keeps you on your toes and operating from a high mental capacity. It keeps you accountable and it keeps you honest. All right. So if you want that, if that's something that you're about, you can message me. There's the number. It's 447360 227 638. Get in touch on WhatsApp or use the link in the chat. Book a call. Okay. So, guys, this is the part where I close down this and I ask you guys if you have any questions for me. We went through a lot there. I appreciate your patience in staying engaged and not jumping into questions right away. But I'm sure you've written some things down. So I'm going to stop sharing. And if anybody has any questions, now's the time to ask. It'd be great to hear from you. Go.
Thanks for the quite informative session. Good to see you again. I've got one question. What would you say would be the division of macros when you're doing the fat loss phase, like the percentage of proteins and fats and carbs? What's the most optimal?
So the most optimal depends on the individual, okay? But typically speaking, the split that I divert to most often is a 40-30-30 split. So 40% protein, 30% carbs, 30% fats. That split is highly dependent on the individual's needs, though. Okay. Like if I'm dealing with someone on, 7,000 calories, 40% of 7,000 calories it's like what, 2,800 calories divided by 3. It's a stupendous, divided by 4. It's like a stupendous amount of protein, right? It's too much. So general rule of thumb, 40-30-30, but lots of scope for variation depending on the individual. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And is there any lower border of protein intake where I shouldn't, like the grams of protein per day that I shouldn't go under? You understand what I mean?
We touched on that in the presentation about, what the ideal amount of protein is to consume on a, gram of the best measure is going to be grams of protein per pound or kilo of lean body mass. So like a general rule of thumb is 1 gram pound of lean body mass. So if you're 100 kilos and you're 20% body fat, we'll call that 80 kilos of lean body mass. That's around about 175 pounds. That's 175 grams of protein as a baseline minimum.
All right, cool. Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions?
I've got one, if that's all right. I was going to ask, normally, pretty consistently, I'll take most sets to failure. You said only take one set to absolute failure per exercise. Would you say it's better to go for the first set or the last set?
Great question. So your capacity for output will be greatest in that first set. I would definitely warm up appropriately, incremental warm-ups, and then make that first set the one that you hit to failure. Except that in the subsequent sets is going to be a heightened level of fatigue, and then from that point, be willing to do the 1 rep to 2 reps in reserve back-offs.
Perfect. Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions, guys? Paul, I see you're pondering something.
Still waters run deep over here.
Okay. All right. I won't wait too long, guys. So, guys, again, any questions you've got, anything that comes to mind, you are more than welcome to ask. Gert, you're just writing a question here. Is your mic not working? Hit me with a question and I will answer. Okay. why cardio after weights and not before? Okay, so if you do cardio before your weight training, you will inherently reduce your energy availability for the weight training. Now, as I said during the presentation, the amount of muscle mass that you hold in your physique is directly correlated to the intensity by which you train. If you look at the absolutely enormous jacked guys in the gym, it's no surprise that they are capable of lifting inordinate amounts of weight. It's correlated, all right? The point is, if you were to then compromise that individual's ability to train heavy and hard, i.e., by doing cardio before the session, their muscle mass would reduce. So we do cardio after weight training because it's less essential to have high levels of energy for cardio. It's more essential to have high levels of energy for weight training. And it's not just from a perspective of total load that you can push. It's as much about the fact that our dexterity, our movement, our joint articulation is better when we've got higher levels of energy. And cardio before, I don't know about you, but it just leaves me feeling drained, weak like a kitten, and disinterested in training. Okay, what do I think of creatine usage? Yeah, I mean, I could have put it in that list. It would have been the next one in my list. I also use creatine. Thank you for reminding me. I use creatine at 5 grams-ish, just a scoop, which is roughly 5 grams per day. Again, if it's going to facilitate that process of better quality training, then it's going to be valuable in that process of retaining muscle mass throughout the process of dropping fat as well. So absolutely 2 thumbs up for creatine. Not a question, but happy to endorse as an existing client if you'd like. Cheers, Paul. I appreciate that. Lastly, any tips on superfoods to, what was that, to combat a craving? Can't see. Yeah. I'm not sure what you mean there. So what superfoods are there that will combat cravings? Nothing that comes to mind. It's not a strategy that I use. In terms of combating cravings, usually cravings come from there being some level of either a deficiency in some sort of nutrient intake or food focus just being way too high. People get cravings when they cut their calories too excessively. If you are cutting your calories too much, you're gonna crave shit food. Of course you are. The other thing that it's often tied to, I don't know if you're talking here about yourself or clients that you work with or whatever, but often craving is linked to emotional eating. That's what I've seen in the past with clients, or a history of eating disorders. So binge eating tied with starvation. This is what I've noticed in the past. Don't know if that answers your question. You said, so like dates, for example, like the Muslims do during Ramadan. Is that not just a cultural thing rather than a like scientifically backed nutritional strategy? Like, I don't know. I'm not sure is the answer to that. I'm not going to pretend that I know. Guys, if there aren't any more questions, I will bring it to a close there. Thank you for joining. I'm going to post this to YouTube, and I've been recording it as well on IG Live, so I'll post it there as well. So any questions that come to mind, just comment on either of those platforms and I'll get back to you. For coaching inquiries, guys, again, you can click the link in my bio. You can apply through my website, builtbytitanium.co.uk, or send me a WhatsApp message. Okay, I will put the WhatsApp number in the comments. Nice one, guys. All the best. Have a good rest of your weekend. Pleasure to have you here, and we will speak soon. Cheers.